Here is the truth that nobody in your English class ever told you. The reason you freeze up, the reason your sentences come out slow and broken, the reason you understand everything when you read it, but the moment someone speaks to you fast, your brain just stops. The reason you practice for months, even years, and still feel like something is missing, like there is this invisible wall between you and fluency, that reason is not your vocabulary. It is not your grammar. It is not even your accent. It is the fact that you are thinking in your native language first. Right now, as you are processing what I just said, some of you translated it. You heard the English words, converted them into your language, understood the meaning, formed a response in your language, and then tried to convert that back into English. And by the time you finished all of that, the moment was gone. The conversation had moved on. You smiled and nodded like you understood, or you said something and it came out wrong, and you felt that familiar sting of frustration. I know that feeling, and I am going to help you eliminate it completely. What we are going to do today is not a traditional English lesson. I am not going to give you a list of vocabulary words or walk you through grammar exercises. What I am going to do is fundamentally rewire the way your brain handles language, because fluency is not about knowing more English. Fluency is about thinking in English, and thinking in English is a skill. It is a trainable, learnable, completely achievable mental skill that anyone, at any age, at any level, can develop with the right approach. Over the next 2 hours, we are going to go deep. We are going to talk about how your brain actually processes language, why the translation habit forms in the first place, and most importantly, how to break it permanently. We are going to cover 10 powerful chapters that will change everything about the way you approach English. By the time we are done, you will not just understand the concept of thinking in English. You will have real tools, real techniques, and a real path forward. So settle in, get comfortable, clear your mind. And let us begin. Chapter 1. Why your brain translates and why it is holding you back. Your brain is the most sophisticated learning machine that has ever existed on this planet. It has been refined over millions of years of evolution to find patterns, make connections, and conserve energy wherever possible. And this is important to understand, because the translation habit you have developed is not a failure. It is actually your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. When you first started learning English, you were given a framework. You were taught that the English word for your native word means this, that this grammar structure corresponds to that grammar structure. Your teachers, your textbooks, your language apps, they all taught you English as a translation system, word for word, sentence for sentence. They gave you a dictionary inside your head, and they told you to use it. And so, your brain did what it always does. It built a habit, it created a neural pathway, a mental shortcut, that said, when you need English, go through your native language first. That pathway became automatic. Then it became deeply grooved into your thinking, and now it fires every single time you try to speak, even when you do not want it to. Here is the problem with that pathway. It is slow. Every time you translate, you are adding an extra step. Imagine you are trying to run a race, but before every single stride, you have to stop and tie your shoe. That is what translation does to your speech. It interrupts the flow. It creates a delay between thought and expression. And in real conversations, that delay is devastating. But there is something even deeper going on, and this is what most people never realize. When you translate, you are not just slowing yourself down. You are actually limiting the quality of what you say. Because language is not just a code for thought. Language shapes thought. The way English speakers express ideas, is fundamentally different from the way speakers of other languages express the same ideas. English has idioms, rhythms, emotional textures that do not have direct equivalents in other languages. When you translate, you are forcing English into the mold of your native language, and the result always sounds a little bit off, a little bit foreign, a little bit wooden. Native speakers do not think and then speak. They think in words. The words and the thoughts happen at the same time. The language is the thought. And that is exactly what you need to train your brain to do. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about a time when you were very emotional, when you were angry or laughing really hard or shocked by something. What happened to your English in that moment? For most people, one of two things happened. Either your English completely fell apart, or, and this is the interesting one, it suddenly got better. When emotions are running high, the brain does not have time to translate. It bypasses the slow analytical pathways and goes directly to whatever language is most automatic. If English is not yet your default, you fall apart. But here is the fascinating thing. If you have been training the right way, you can sometimes access a more fluent, more natural English in emotional moments, precisely because the translation filter drops away. That tells you everything you need to know about where fluency lives. Fluency does not live in your analytical mind. It lives in your automatic mind. And the entire job of this masterclass is to move your English from the analytical system to the automatic system. Let me tell you about how the brain actually processes language in simple terms. There are two broad modes of thinking that are relevant here. The first is slow, deliberate, analytical thinking. This is the mode you use when you are solving a math problem or carefully planning what to write in an important email. It is precise and logical, but it is slow. The second mode is fast, automatic, intuitive thinking. This is the mode you use when you are having a flowing conversation, when you are telling a joke, when you are reacting to something in real time. This mode is incredibly fast, but it can only work with material that has already been deeply internalized. When you translate, you are using the first mode. When a native speaker talks, they are using the second mode. And the entire transformation we are working toward is a migration, moving your English from the slow mode into the fast mode so that it becomes automatic, effortless, and natural. The good news is that this migration is not only possible, it is inevitable if you train correctly. Your brain is neuroplastic. It rewires itself based on experience. Every time you practice thinking in English, you are literally building new neural pathways. You are creating new grooves in your brain. And over time, those grooves become the path of least resistance. The new habit replaces the old one. But here is the key word: correctly. Because most people who are trying to improve their English are not training correctly. Then they are doing things that reinforce the translation habit rather than breaking it. They are studying vocabulary lists, which is translation. They are doing grammar exercises where they convert sentences from one language to another, which is translation. They are using apps that show them a picture and ask them for the word, and they think the picture, then their native word, then the English word, which is translation. Everything changes when you start training in English from English. When you encounter a new word and you define it with other English words instead of translating it. When you think about your day in English instead of narrating it in your native language and then imagining how to say it in English. When you dream in English, and yes, that is something that can and will happen when you follow this program. And that is where we are going. And the first step is simply understanding what we are up against. You now know that the translation habit is a neural pattern. It is grooved into your brain, but it is not permanent. It is not your identity. It is not a ceiling on your ability. It is just a habit, and habits can be changed. In the chapters that follow, we are going to attack that habit from every angle. We are going to use neuroscience, psychology, linguistics, and practical daily training to systematically replace it with a new habit, the habit of thinking in English. Chapter 2. The concept of language immersion and how to create it without moving to an English-speaking country. When people talk about the fastest way to learn a language, they almost always say the same thing. Move to the country, immerse yourself. And there is real truth in that idea. But there is also a massive misunderstanding buried inside it. Because the people who move to a new country and come back fluent did not become fluent just because they were surrounded by the language. They became fluent because of what that environment forced their brain to do. Think about what actually happens when you land in a new country and you do not speak the language well. First, there is panic. You need to buy groceries, and you do not know how to ask where the milk is. You need to take the bus, and you cannot read the schedule. You need to make friends, and you cannot express your personality. So your brain is put under pressure, real, immediate, emotional pressure. And under that pressure, it has two choices. Keep trying to translate everything and fail constantly, and to find a way to function directly in the new language. Most people, in that situation, eventually choose the second option. Not because they are smart or talented, but because they have no other choice. The survival instinct kicks in and tells the brain, figure this out, and figure it out now. And the brain responds by building those pathways fast. So the secret of immersion is not geography. The secret of immersion is pressure, purpose, and repetition in the target language. And every single one of those three things can be recreated wherever you are in the world right now. Let us talk about how to build immersion into your daily life without moving anywhere. The first thing you need to do is change your environment. And I mean this literally. Change the language settings on your phone to English. Change your computer to English. And change your social media to English. This matters more than most people realize, because your phone is something you interact with dozens or hundreds of times a day. Every time you check a notification, look at the time, read a menu, open an app, your brain is processing language. If that language is always your native language, you are reinforcing the native language pathways constantly. If that language switches to English, you start building English associations with everyday life. You start seeing the world through an English lens. The second thing is to surround yourself with English audio, not study audio, not slow, carefully pronounced textbook audio, real English audio. Podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube channels, movies, television shows, interviews, stand-up comedy, documentaries, whatever you genuinely enjoy consuming. And here is the critical part. Do not use subtitles in your native language. If you need subtitles, use English subtitles. But your goal is to eventually not need them at all. Now, a lot of people push back on this. They say, if I do not understand everything, what is the point? And the point is this. When you are listening to English and you cannot reach for your native language as a safety net, because there are no subtitles, because it is going too fast, because you have decided you are going to stay in the English stream, your brain is forced to work with what it has. It starts picking up context. It starts using tone, rhythm, and surrounding words to piece together meaning. This is exactly how children learn language, not by translating, but by inferring. And this inferential processing is what builds the intuitive understanding you need for fluency. The third element of building immersion at home is creating social pressure. Find people to speak English with. This does not have to be a native speaker. Language exchange partners, online communities, conversation clubs, video call groups. There are millions of people around the world who want to practice their English with someone who is motivated just like you. The social element is crucial because it adds that emotional pressure that the brain needs. When you are talking to a real person in real time, you cannot pause and translate. You have to respond. And that urgency is the engine of fluency. The fourth element, and perhaps the most underestimated one, is making your internal world English. Your inner monologue, the voice inside your head that narrates your life, comments on what you see, worries about things, makes decisions. That voice is almost certainly speaking your native language right now. And that needs to change. We are going to talk about this in much more depth later in the masterclass, because inner monologue training is one of the most powerful tools available to you. But for now, just plant this seed. Every moment that your inner voice can switch to English, even imperfectly, even haltingly, is a moment of real, powerful language training. You do not need a teacher present. You do not need a textbook. You just need to narrate your existence in English and let your brain start building those connections. The fifth element is reading in English, but reading in a specific way. So you are not reading and looking up every word, not reading and translating, reading and pushing through. When you encounter a word you do not know, try to guess it from context. Stay in the flow of the text. Feel the rhythm of the sentences. Let the language wash over you. Because when you read this way, you are absorbing the grammar patterns of English naturally, the way children absorb the grammar of their native language, through exposure and instinct, not through rules. Now, I want to talk about something that is slightly counterintuitive. Immersion does not mean being confused all the time. There is a concept in language learning called comprehensible input. The idea that you learn best from material that is slightly above your current level, not way above it. If everything you are listening to or reading is completely incomprehensible, your brain gives up. It cannot build anything from pure noise. But if you are getting, say, 70 to 80% of the meaning, and the remaining 20 to 30% is being filled in by context, intuition, and inference, that is the sweet spot. That is where learning explodes. So be strategic about your immersion. Start with topics you already know well. If you are passionate about football, immerse yourself in English football commentary and analysis. You already know the concepts, so your brain can focus on the language. If you love cooking, follow English cooking channels. If you are interested in psychology, listen to English psychology podcasts. Your knowledge of the topic provides a scaffold that helps your brain make sense of the language. And gradually, as your English grows stronger, but you can expand into new territory, the goal of everything in this chapter is to make English the water you swim in, not a subject you study. You want English to feel like the air around you, constant, natural, and effortless. That shift does not happen in a classroom. It happens in your daily life, through the choices you make about what you read, watch, listen to, and think in every single day. Chapter 3, Vocabulary Without Translation, Building a Native Mental Lexicon. Here is something I want you to try right now. I want you to think of the word home. Do not think of its translation. Just think of the word home and notice what happens in your mind. If English is not your native language, what probably happened is this. You thought of the word in your native language first, or you thought of a definition, or you thought of nothing but an abstract concept floating in space. But if I asked a native English speaker to think of the word home, something very different would happen. Images would come, feelings would come, memories would come, the smell of a specific kitchen, the sound of a door closing. a sense of safety, or maybe longing, or complicated family history. The word home for a native speaker is not a label. It is a universe of personal meaning, experience, and emotion. That is what a word in your native language feels like. And that is what words in English need to feel like if you are ever going to think in English naturally. Right now, most of the English words in your vocabulary are labels. They are linked to concepts in your native language. You know that home means your native word for home. But the native word is the real meaning, and home is just a code for it. This is the fundamental architecture of a translation-based vocabulary, and it is exactly what we need to dismantle. What we need to build instead is a direct connection between English words and the real world, between English words and your experiences, your senses, your emotions. We need to bypass the native language layer completely and build English meanings that are rich, personal, and vivid. How do we do this? Through a technique I call experiential vocabulary building. Instead of learning a new word by finding its translation, you learn it by associating it with an experience. Let us say you are learning the word exhausted. Instead of writing down that it means tired in your language, I want you to close your eyes and remember a moment when you felt truly, deeply exhausted. Maybe it was after a very long day of travel. Maybe it was after a difficult exam. Maybe it was after carrying heavy boxes up several flights of stairs. Really feel that memory. Feel the weight in your limbs, the cloudiness in your mind, the desperate desire to just lie down, and then attach the word exhausted to that physical, emotional memory. Let the word live in that experience. Let it mean that feeling. Not a word in your language, but the actual visceral sensation of being spent and depleted. When you learn vocabulary this way, something remarkable happens. The next time you want to express that feeling, you do not need to go through your native language. The feeling itself will trigger the English word, because you have built a direct neural connection between the two. That is what it means to truly own a word in English. You can do this with every type of vocabulary. For concrete nouns, objects you can see and touch, try to always visualize the actual object, never the word for it in your native language. See a chair, say chair. See sunlight coming through a window, say sunlight. Create strong visual associations. Make them specific. Not just a chair, but that old wooden chair in your grandmother's kitchen. The more specific and personal the image, the stronger the neural connection. For abstract words, things like freedom, justice, ambition, you need to go one step further and build a personal narrative. What does freedom feel like to you? When did you feel it? Though attach the English word to that personal experience of the concept. Do not define freedom. Feel freedom and call it by its English name. For action words, verbs, the best approach is to physically do the action or at least vividly imagine doing it. The word stride is not just a synonym for walk. It is a specific way of walking, confident, purposeful, with long steps. Feel yourself striding, embody the word, and then that word will always arrive in your mind, complete and alive, not as an abstraction, but as an action you understand in your body. For emotional vocabulary, words like melancholy, exhilarated, anxious, dig into your emotional memory. Remember specific moments. Let yourself feel the edge of that emotion and then name it in English. Over time, your emotions themselves will start to reach for English words first, because those words have become associated with the actual emotional experience. Now, let us talk about the power of context over memorization. Most language learners try to memorize vocabulary lists. They sit with a flashcard and drill the word and its translation over and over. And this is one of the least effective ways to build a native mental lexicon for several reasons. First, it reinforces the translation habit. Second, it teaches the word in isolation, divorced from any context. And third, it gives the word no emotional weight, nothing to hook it to in your memory. Words that stick are words that you have encountered in meaningful contexts. When you hear a new word in a movie during a scene that moved you, when you read a new word in a book during a passage that made you stop and think, now when you encounter a new word in a conversation with someone you care about, those words stick. They stick because they are wrapped in emotion, in context, in story. So one of the best things you can do for your vocabulary is to read a lot of English fiction, novels, short stories, narrative nonfiction, because in fiction, words live in scenes. They are spoken by characters in emotional moments. They are attached to images and sensations and consequences. And your brain, which is fundamentally a narrative machine, learns them and keeps them. Another powerful technique is something I call the English to English dictionary habit. From this point forward, when you want to look up the meaning of an English word, I want you to look it up in an English dictionary, not a bilingual one. Read the English definition. Read the example sentences. And notice how the word is used in different contexts. Yes, this is harder. Yes, it takes more time. But every time you do it, you are strengthening the English-only neural network in your brain. You are building a web of English meaning that does not depend on any other language. Over time, as you build this web, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to feel the nuances between words. You feel the difference between happy and delighted and content and ecstatic. You feel the difference between look and glance and stare and gaze. These are not distinctions that a bilingual dictionary can give you. They are distinctions that you build through exposure, through context, through living inside the language. And when you have them, your English becomes not just correct, but beautiful, not just functional, but alive. Chapter 4: The Power of Chunks. How native speakers really think. Here is something that linguistics research has revealed that completely transformed how language teachers and scientists think about fluency. Native speakers do not build sentences word by word. Read that again. Native speakers do not build sentences word by word. If you watch what happens in the brain when a native speaker talks, you do not see individual words being selected and arranged like pieces of a puzzle. What you see is something much more interesting. You see large chunks of language being retrieved and deployed as single units. Phrases, expressions, collocations, fixed patterns, these are stored and accessed as wholes, not as collections of individual words. When a native English speaker says, as a matter of fact, they are not selecting as, then a, then matter, then of, then fact, and arranging them according to grammar rules. They are retrieving the entire chunk as a matter of fact, as a single unit, the way you might grab a pre-assembled piece of furniture off a shelf, rather than building it from raw wood every time. This is one of the biggest secrets of natural-sounding English, and almost nobody teaches it explicitly. The reason non-native speakers often sound slightly off, even when their grammar is technically correct and their vocabulary is impressive, is that they are building sentences word by word, while native speakers are assembling chunks. Think about the difference between these two sentences. Someone says, "This is not a problem that is small," and someone else says, "This is no small problem." Both are grammatically correct. Both mean the same thing. But one sounds like a native speaker and one does not. Why? Because no small problem is a chunk? It is a ready-made expression stored and retrieved as a unit. The first sentence is word-by-word construction. The second is chunk deployment. So if you want to think in English like a native speaker, you need to stop building sentences and start building a library of chunks. What counts as a chunk? Chunks can be idioms, expressions like, it's not the end of the world, or we're in the same boat, or let's not beat around the bush. Chunks can be collocations, words that naturally go together, like make a decision, not do a decision, heavy rain, not strong rain, Anna take a shower, not have a bath in American English, though that works in British. Chunks can be discourse markers, the phrases that structure conversation, like, what I mean is, to be honest, the thing is, having said that. Chunks can be sentence frames, structures that are always used in the same way, like, the reason I'm asking is, or what surprises me is that, or it goes without saying that. The key to working with chunks is to learn them in context and to learn them as wholes. When you encounter an idiom, do not try to analyze why each word means what it means. Just absorb the whole thing. Under the weather does not make logical sense word by word, and trying to analyze it will only confuse you. But if you accept it as a single chunk that means feeling ill, and you start using it in conversation, it will quickly become natural. Here is a practical approach for building your chunk library. Keep a chunk journal. Every time you hear or read an expression that sounds natural and interesting, write it down. Not just the phrase, but the full context, the whole sentence it appeared in, the situation in which it was used, who said it, and to whom and why. Because context is what allows a chunk to feel alive rather than memorized. Then practice using that chunk actively. Use it in your inner monologue. Use it in your next conversation. Use it when you are writing an email or a message to a friend. The goal is to get it from your conscious memory into your automatic retrieval system. And the way to do that is repetition in real contexts. Not drilling, but genuinely using the chunk to express something you actually mean. To pay special attention to high-frequency chunks. These are the expressions that native speakers use constantly, perhaps without even noticing. Things like, to be fair, at the end of the day, that being said, to be honest with you, I see where you're coming from. I didn't mean it that way. You know what I mean. Kind of, sort of, I guess. These small lubricating expressions are absolutely everywhere in natural English conversation, and they make an enormous difference to how natural you sound. If you can deploy them automatically, you will immediately sound more fluent because they signal to the listener that you are operating inside the rhythms of the language. Then another powerful category of chunks is what linguists call lexical collocations, the specific verb-noun or adjective-noun combinations that native speakers use automatically. Collocations are one of the trickiest aspects of English for non-native speakers because the choice of which word goes with which often seems arbitrary. You can make a mistake, but you commit a crime. You can do homework, but you write an essay. Rain can be heavy, but not strong. Wind can be strong, but not heavy. There is no deep logical reason for many of these. They are just the patterns of the language. And the only way to internalize them is through massive exposure. This is why reading and listening extensively in English is so important. Every time you are exposed to natural English, you are absorbing collocation patterns. Your brain is quietly noting which words appear together, how frequently, and in what contexts. And gradually, certain combinations start to feel right and others start to feel wrong. Not because you can explain the rule, but because your brain has built statistical models of the language from all that exposure. This intuitive sense of what sounds right is what native speakers have, And it is what you are building. It is not the ability to explain grammar rules. It is the ability to feel what is correct. And that feeling is built through chunks, through exposure, and through time spent inside the language. Chapter 5. The Inner Monologue, Your Secret Weapon for Fluency. Of everything we are going to cover in this masterclass, this chapter might be the one that creates the most dramatic change in your English in the shortest amount of time. Because what I am about to teach you is a technique that you can use literally every waking hour of your life, with no equipment, no teacher, no partner, and no cost whatsoever. I am talking about your inner monologue. Right now, there is a voice inside your head. It narrates your experience. It comments on things. It worries, plans, remembers, imagines, judges. It is the voice of your thinking self. And for most people learning English, that voice speaks their native language absolutely fluently, constantly, automatically, and English never enters it at all. That needs to change. And here is why it is so powerful when it does. Your inner monologue is the rehearsal space for your spoken language. When you think in words, you are practicing speaking. Every sentence that forms in your mind is a sentence that is reinforcing neural pathways, building fluency, training your brain in the rhythms and patterns of whatever language you are thinking in. If that language is always your native language, you are spending every waking moment practicing your native language and none of that time practicing English. But what if you could switch that? What if, for several hours a day, your inner voice shifted into English? How much practice would that be? How many sentences, how many words, how many grammar patterns and collocations and chunks would you be reinforcing? The amount of English practice packed into a single day of inner monologue work dwarfs anything you could do in a classroom. Now, the first thing most people say when I suggest this is, "But I don't have enough English to think in it, and I don't know the words for everything I want to think about." And that is a completely understandable concern. But here is how we handle it. You start small. You do not try to think your entire inner life in English immediately. You start with simple narration of your immediate physical experience. Right now, wherever you are, you can say to yourself in English, "I am sitting on the couch, the room is quiet, the light is coming through the window. I have a glass of water next to me. I am listening to this program about English." Simple, descriptive, present tense sentences about exactly what is happening right now. This is not difficult. You already know these words, but you are probably never using them in your inner monologue. And every time you do, you are laying down another layer of English neural circuitry. From there, you gradually expand. You start narrating your actions as you do them. While you are making coffee, you think, "I'm filling the kettle. I'm putting it on to boil. The coffee is in the cupboard. I need a clean mug." While you are walking, you think, "The street is busy. It's colder than yesterday. That car just ran a red light." While you are at work, you think, "I need to finish this report before lunch. I wonder what my boss will think of the new proposal." Then you expand further. You start using your inner monologue to process your emotions in English. Instead of feeling frustrated and thinking about it in your native language, you think, "I'm really frustrated right now. I've been trying to solve this problem for an hour and I can't figure it out. And I need to take a break and come back to it with fresh eyes." This is harder because emotions are deeply tied to your native language. Your first language is always your emotional language in some ways. But it is also incredibly powerful, because when you learn to name and process emotions in English, those emotional associations embed the language at the deepest level, then expand even further. Start thinking about abstract ideas in English. Start having imaginary conversations in English. When you are about to have a real conversation that might be difficult, a meeting, a date, A job interview, rehearse it in English in your mind first. Play both sides of the conversation. Imagine the other person's responses and respond to them. This kind of mental rehearsal is used by top athletes, musicians, and performers to prepare for high-stakes moments, and it works for language too. There is a fascinating thing that begins to happen when you commit to this practice. After a few weeks of consistent inner monologue work, you will notice that certain thoughts start arriving in English before you even consciously switch. Something funny happens, and the English phrase arrives first. You see something beautiful, and the English words come before the native language words. This is not a trick. This is your brain reorganizing itself. This is the translation habit being actively replaced by a direct English thinking habit. And this is one of the most exciting moments in a language learner's journey. You have your first dream in English. It is a sign that English has penetrated deep enough into your subconscious that it is being processed even when your conscious mind is completely offline. When that happens, something has fundamentally shifted. Now, there are common challenges with inner monologue practice, and I want to address them honestly. The first challenge is vocabulary gaps. You will frequently encounter situations where you want to think something in English and you do not know the word. Do not let this stop you. Have two options. Either describe the thing with words you do have. This is incredibly good practice, and it builds the skill of circumlocution, which is one of the most important skills in real conversation. Or make a mental note of the gap and look it up later in English. Either way, keep going. Do not switch to your native language, and find a way around the gap and keep the English stream flowing. The second challenge is self-consciousness. Inner monologue work can feel strange and artificial at first. Your inner voice might say in your native language, "This is ridiculous. I sound like a child." That is completely normal. You are building a new habit in a space, your own mind, that has never been used for this before. The strangeness will pass, and what replaces it is astonishing. The third challenge is consistency. It is very easy to forget to do it. Life gets busy, you get distracted, and suddenly you realize you have been in your native language for the last 3 hours. That is fine. The moment you realize it, switch back. Do not be harsh with yourself. Building a new mental habit is not about being perfect. It is about returning to the practice again and again, then as many times as it takes. One technique that helps with consistency is to anchor the inner monologue practice to specific times or activities. Always think in English while you are making breakfast. Always think in English while you are commuting. Always think in English while you are exercising. The routine provides a trigger, and the trigger makes the habit more automatic. Your inner monologue is the most intimate and continuous practice space you will ever have. Use it. Chapter 6. Listening like a native, training your ear and your intuition. There is a dimension of English that no textbook, no classroom, and no grammar lesson can fully teach you. It is the music of the language, the rhythm, the melody, the stress patterns, the rise and fall of intonation, the way certain words are swallowed and others are stretched. The way a sentence sounds completely different depending on which word carries the emphasis. This is the phonological layer of English, and it is absolutely critical to fluency, not just for speaking, but for listening. Because if your ear is not trained to the music of English, you will miss things. Fast speech will blur into noise. Native speakers will seem to be speaking too quickly, swallowing words, mumbling, when in reality, they are just speaking the way English speakers naturally speak, and your ear has not yet been calibrated to hear it. Think about what happens when you listen to a style of music that is completely new to you. At first, it sounds like noise. You cannot distinguish the individual instruments. You cannot follow the melody. But after enough exposure, something shifts. Your brain starts to recognize patterns. You start to hear the structure underneath what sounded like chaos. You start to enjoy it. Your ears have been trained. The same thing happens with listening to English. And the training process requires the same thing: massive, repeated, engaged exposure. Let me share some specific techniques for training your ear. The first technique is what I call active listening with repetition. Find a short piece of audio. It can be a clip from a podcast, a scene from a TV show, a short video, anything with natural conversational English. Listen to it once without stopping. Just let it flow and catch what you can. Then listen again, and this time, pause after every sentence. Say the sentence out loud yourself. Try to match the exact rhythm, stress, and intonation of the speaker. You are not just listening, you are mimicking. Mimicking is one of the most powerful language learning techniques that exists. Children do it constantly and unconsciously. You need to do it consciously and deliberately. Repeat this with the same clip until you can reproduce it naturally, until your version sounds like the original, until the rhythm of those sentences has been absorbed into your mouth and your breath and your sense of English sound. The second technique is called shadowing, and it is beloved among serious language learners. Shadowing means listening to audio and repeating it almost simultaneously, a half second behind the speaker, like an echo. You are not waiting for the speaker to finish. You are speaking along with them, matching their rhythm in real time. This is incredibly challenging, but the results are extraordinary. Shadowing forces your brain and your mouth to process English at the speed of natural speech. It trains your ear to anticipate patterns. It builds the physical muscle memory in your mouth for English sounds, and it is deeply immersive. While you are shadowing, you cannot possibly be translating, because there is simply not enough time. If you practice shadowing for even 15 to 20 minutes a day with high-quality audio, a documentary narrator, a skilled podcast host, an audiobook reader, you will see dramatic improvements in your listening comprehension and your speaking rhythm within weeks. The third technique for ear training is to focus on what linguists call connected speech. This is what happens to English when it is spoken naturally and quickly. Words blend together, sounds disappear, new sounds are created at the boundaries between words. Want to becomes wanna. Going to becomes gonna. Have to becomes hafta. Did you becomes didya. What are you doing becomes something like what you doin'. These are not mistakes. They are the natural phonology of conversational English, and if your ear is not trained to recognize them, fast speech will always sound like a foreign language to you, even when your vocabulary and grammar are excellent. Study connected speech explicitly. Listen for it. Learn the common patterns: consonant assimilation, vowel reduction, elision, the dropping of sounds. Practice saying them yourself. When you understand that "I don't know" is commonly said as something like "I don't know" and "I'm gonna go" sounds very different from "I am going to go," you unlock a whole layer of natural English that was previously closed to you. The fourth technique is to develop what I call passive listening practice. This is the practice of putting English audio on in the background of your daily life, even when you are not actively focusing on it. While you are cooking, cleaning, commuting, doing tasks that do not require mental concentration, have English playing. Podcasts, radio, audiobooks, whatever you enjoy. Your conscious mind does not need to be fully engaged. Your brain is still absorbing the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language at a level below conscious awareness. This kind of passive exposure is part of what gives children such an enormous advantage in language learning. They are surrounded by their native language even when no one is actively teaching them. The language is in the air, and the brain soaks it up. You can recreate a version of this for English, and it compounds over time in ways that are hard to measure but very real. The fifth technique is something that requires a specific mindset shift. Stop trying to understand every word. This is perhaps the hardest thing to teach to language learners who have been trained in school to translate and comprehend 100% of what they encounter. But listening for every word creates anxiety, and anxiety blocks comprehension. When you are anxiously hunting for each individual word, you miss the flow, the context, and the meaning that lives in the whole. Native speakers do not understand every word in every sentence they hear. They understand the gist, they pick up the key information, they let some things slide past and trust that the overall meaning will arrive. This is a completely different mode of listening. It is holistic rather than analytical, and it is the mode you need to train. Practice letting go of the parts you miss. Trust the context. Follow the thread of meaning. You will be surprised how much you understand when you stop panicking about what you are missing and instead relax into what you are receiving. Chapter 7. Speaking Without Fear. Rewiring Your Relationship with Mistakes. Here is a difficult truth. One of the biggest reasons people cannot break the translation habit is not linguistic. It is psychological. It is fear. The fear of making a mistake, the fear of sounding stupid, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being judged by native speakers or by other learners, or by that very critical voice inside your own head. This fear causes hesitation, and hesitation is the moment when the translation habit sneaks back in. Because the analytical mind says, wait, let me check this first. Let me make sure it is correct in my native language before I say it in English. Fear is the handbrake on fluency, and if we do not deal with it, every other technique in this masterclass will be fighting against it. So let us talk about mistakes. Let us talk about what they actually are and what they actually mean, and what the relationship with mistakes looks like for someone who is truly on the path to fluency. First, let us establish something. Every single fluent speaker of any language makes mistakes. Native speakers make grammatical errors. They use wrong words. They mix up idioms. They say things they did not mean and have to correct themselves. Even highly educated native speakers in professional contexts make mistakes constantly. Mistakes are not a sign of incompetence. They are a sign of communication in progress. Second, and this is crucial, in real conversation, people are not listening to your grammar. They are listening to your meaning. When you are having a conversation with another person, that person's primary goal is to understand what you are trying to say. They are not sitting there with a red pen evaluating your sentence structure. They are tracking the meaning, following the story, responding to your ideas. Grammatical mistakes that do not impede meaning are almost always either not noticed or instantly forgiven. Think about how you listen when someone speaks your native language with an accent or makes grammatical errors. If they are communicating something interesting or genuine, you are almost certainly focused on the content, not the errors. The same is true for virtually everyone listening to you speak English. Third, and I want you to really sit with this, mistakes are the evidence of learning. When you make a mistake in English, your brain has attempted something. It has reached for English and produced something. Maybe it was imperfect, but the reaching is the practice. The reaching is the growth. If you never make mistakes, it means you are only ever saying what you are 100% sure of, and you are never stretching, never pushing, never growing. The most fluent non-native speakers you will ever meet are not the ones who made the fewest mistakes on their journey. They are the ones who made the most mistakes and kept going anyway. So how do you actually rewire your relationship with mistakes? How do you move from fear to freedom? The first step is to reframe what a mistake means. Instead of seeing a mistake as a failure, as evidence that you are bad at English, see it as data. See it as information about where your English is right now and what needs to grow. A doctor who gets a test result back does not consider the result a personal failure. They consider it useful information. Take the same approach to your English mistakes. They are not shameful. They are useful. The second step is to practice in low-stakes environments before high-stakes ones. If the only time you speak English is in important meetings or stressful social situations, the stakes are too high and the fear will always win. Create regular, low-stakes English-speaking experiences. Talk to language exchange partners whose only goal is conversation practice. Talk to yourself. Record yourself and listen back. Talk to customer service bots in English. Write messages to online communities in English. Build a habit of speaking English where the consequences of a mistake are essentially zero, so that the habit of speaking becomes automatic and the fear loses its grip. The third step is to actively celebrate your mistakes. I am serious. When you make a mistake and you notice it, instead of cringing or apologizing excessively, smile internally because you reached for something. You tried. You were operating at the edge of your ability, and that is exactly where growth happens. The fourth step is to shift your performance goal. Instead of trying to speak correctly, try to communicate effectively. These are not the same goal, and they produce very different psychological states. When your goal is correctness, any mistake feels like a failure. When your goal is communication, a mistake is just a small obstacle in the path of meaning, easily worked around, quickly forgotten. The fifth step is to develop resilience tools for the moment when you do freeze. Because it will happen. You will be in a conversation and a word will not come. Your mind will go blank. This is not the end. Have a set of phrases ready for exactly this moment. What I'm trying to say is, the word is escaping me right now. But what I mean is, give me a second, I'm thinking, how do I put this? These phrases do two things. They keep the conversation going and they buy you time. And they are actually phrases that native speakers use all the time. You are not exposing yourself as a non-fluent speaker. You are participating in a completely normal part of human conversation. The sixth and perhaps deepest step is to change your identity story around English. Many people who struggle with English have a story about themselves that goes something like, I am not good at languages, or my English will always be limited because I did not start young enough, or people who are truly fluent have something I do not have. These stories are not facts, they are beliefs, and beliefs can be changed. The truth is, you are a person who is becoming fluent in English. That process is happening right now, in this moment, as you engage with this material. Every day that you practice, you are the person who is building fluency, not who will build fluency, who is building it right now. And the mistakes you make along the way are part of that story. They are evidence of your courage and your commitment, not evidence of your limitation. Chapter 8. English Emotions. Feeling the language, not just using it. Here is something that language teachers almost never discuss, and yet it might be one of the most important factors in whether you achieve true fluency. Emotions. Language and emotion are deeply intertwined in the brain. When we learn our native language as children, we are not just absorbing sounds and grammar. We are absorbing meaning in the context of total emotional immersion. A child learns the word hungry when they feel hunger, and their mother says, "Are you hungry?" The word is soaked in physical sensation and emotional relief and connection and love. A child learns the word danger when a parent's voice shifts to alarm and urgency. The word arrives with a visceral surge of the nervous system. Every word of the native language is this way, imbued with layers of emotional and physical experience from the moment of acquisition. And then there is your English, learned in a classroom, printed in a textbook, associated with grammar exercises and vocabulary tests, and the slightly anxious feeling of being evaluated. The emotional texture of your English learning is largely neutral or negative, at best intellectual, at worst stressful. And this emotional flatness is one of the reasons that English words often feel different from native language words. They feel like labels rather than experiences. To truly think in English, you need to build emotional associations with the language. You need English to feel like something, not just mean something. How do you do this? One of the most powerful ways is through English media that genuinely moves you. When a scene in an English movie makes you cry, when an English song gives you chills, when an English book keeps you up all night because you have to know what happens next. In those moments, your emotional brain is flooding the language with meaning. Those English words and phrases are being etched into your memory, not just cognitively, but emotionally. They are becoming real in the deepest sense. This is why I always encourage language learners to choose English content that they actually love, not just content that seems educational. If you love horror films, watch horror films in English. If you love romance novels, read romance novels in English. If you love stand-up comedy, watch stand-up comedy in English. The emotional engagement is the learning. The pleasure is the mechanism. Another powerful way to build emotional English is to write in English about things that matter to you personally. Keep a journal in English, not a grammar exercise journal. A real journal where you write about your feelings, your fears, your dreams, your memories, your relationships. When you struggle to express something emotional in English and you push through the gap and find the words, those words belong to you in a profound way. You earned them, you needed them, and your brain will not let them go. Something else worth exploring: music. If you listen to English music and actually pay attention to the lyrics, really read them, really understand what the song is about, let the music carry the meaning. You are building emotional associations with English phrases and rhythms. Songs are extraordinarily effective language learning tools precisely because they pair language with music, and music is one of the most emotion-triggering things the human brain encounters. Language paired with music goes into memory in a completely different, much deeper way than language heard in isolation. That is why children learn songs and rhymes so easily, and why you probably still remember every word of the English songs you learned as a child. Another technique for building emotional English involves something called emotional switching, the practice of deliberately processing a strong emotion in English instead of your native language. The next time you feel a strong emotion, whether it is joy, frustration, grief, excitement, love, try to name and explore that emotion in English. Write about it in English. Think about it in English. Say to yourself in English, "What is this feeling? Where is it coming from? What does it remind me of? What do I want to do with it?" This is uncomfortable at first, because our emotional lives are deeply rooted in our native language. But discomfort is where growth lives, and the payoff is enormous. When your emotions start connecting to English, the language stops being a foreign system and starts being a part of you. Then there is also the dimension of humor. Humor is one of the highest levels of language mastery because jokes depend on shared cultural context, on timing, on wordplay, on the exact connotations of specific words. When you can genuinely laugh at an English joke, not because you translated it and understood that it was meant to be funny, but because it actually struck you as funny in the moment, something important has happened. Your brain has processed it fast enough and deeply enough that the humor arrived before the analysis. That is thinking in English. So watch English comedy, read English satire, follow English comedians on social media. And when you encounter something funny, pay attention to why it is funny. What word choice made the joke land? What expectation did it set up and then subvert? Analyzing humor in English, of course, is one of the richest and most enjoyable ways to deepen your understanding of how the language actually works at its most subtle and sophisticated levels. Chapter 9: Advanced Fluency, Thinking in Concepts, Not Words. Everything we have covered so far has been about building the foundation of English thinking: vocabulary, chunks, inner monologue, listening, emotion. Now, I want to take you to the next level. I want to talk about what it looks and feels like when the process goes truly deep. When you are not just thinking in English words, but thinking in English concepts. This is a subtle but enormously important distinction. Thinking in English words means that when you want to say something, the English words come instead of native language words. That is a major step, and it is what most learners are aiming for. But thinking in English concepts means something more fundamental. It means that the thought itself, the raw, pre-verbal sense of something you want to express, is already shaped by the English language. It means the language and the thought are arriving together, not sequentially. Let me give you an example to make this concrete. In English, there is a word, procrastination. It describes a very specific behavior and psychological experience, the habit of delaying tasks, often accompanied by a particular kind of guilt and self-deception. Now, most other languages have ways to express this idea, but not all of them have a single, precise, culturally loaded word for it. In English, procrastination carries centuries of moral and psychological connotation. It is not just a behavior, it is almost a personality flaw, a subject of comedy, something people confess to and joke about and write books about overcoming. When you have spent enough time in English to really inhabit that word, when procrastination does not just translate to your native concept of delay, but actually carries its English cultural weight, something has shifted. You have started to think an English thought, not just dress a native thought in English clothing. This happens with hundreds of concepts. English has words and ideas that shape the way native speakers perceive reality in very specific ways. The idea of small talk and the social rituals around it. The concept of work-life balance and the particular kind of modern anxiety it names. And the subtle difference between sympathy and empathy. The cultural meaning of fair play. The idea that something can be bittersweet, holding joy and sadness simultaneously in the same moment. These are not just words, they are lenses, they are ways of seeing. As your English deepens, you start to see through these lenses, and when you do, your thinking changes, not just how you express it, but the actual structure of the thoughts themselves. English gives you new concepts, new distinctions, new ways of organizing experience. And this is one of the most profound rewards of true bilingualism. You have access to more than one conceptual world. You can think thoughts in English that you literally cannot think in the same way in your native language. Your mind becomes richer. So how do you accelerate the journey toward this deeper level of English thinking? One crucial practice is to engage with English ideas. not just English language. Read English philosophers, English thinkers, English writers who are exploring ideas that you find genuinely interesting and challenging. Engage with English language debates about things that matter to you. When you are grappling with a complex idea in English, when you are genuinely trying to think something through, not just translate something you already thought in your native language, you are building the deepest possible English circuitry. Another practice is what I call concept-first thinking. When you want to say something, instead of starting with the thought in your native language and translating, try to start with the feeling or the concept, the raw, preverbal sense of what you want to express, and reach directly for English to clothe it. This is a form of mental discipline that becomes easier with practice. It is asking your brain to skip the native language detour and go directly to English. You will not always succeed, especially in the beginning, but every time you do, you are strengthening the direct pathway. Advanced fluency also involves developing what I call English intuitions about the world. When something happens in your life, instead of processing it first in your native language and then perhaps translating your conclusion, try to process it directly in English. When you read a news story and have a reaction, think your reaction in English. When you are making a decision, deliberate in English. When you are imagining a future scenario, imagine it in English. The goal, the beautiful, ambitious, absolutely achievable goal, is for English to become not a second language, but a second self. A version of you that thinks, feels, and sees the world through the lens of English, with all the richness and nuance that entails. And here is something important to understand about this level of fluency. It does not erase your native language. It does not replace your identity or your culture. Truly fluent bilinguals do not lose one language when they gain another. They gain a new perspective. They have the extraordinary ability to move between two worlds, two conceptual spaces, two ways of being. This is one of the great privileges of language learning, and it is available to you. Chapter 10. The Daily Practice. Building. The routine that makes fluency inevitable. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground in this masterclass. We have talked about the neuroscience of why your brain translates. We have explored the power of immersion and how to create it anywhere. We have built a new approach to vocabulary that creates real, felt English meaning. We have uncovered the secret of chunks and how native speakers really think. We have activated the inner monologue. We have trained the ear. We have rewired the relationship with mistakes. We have built emotional English. We have reached toward the deepest level of thinking and concepts, not just words. All of this is real. All of it works. But none of it works unless you actually do it. Every day. Consistently. Over time. When this final chapter is about building the daily practice that makes fluency not a hope or a dream, but an inevitable outcome. Because fluency is not something that happens to you. It is something you build, brick by brick, day by day, through the accumulated weight of thousands of small decisions to practice. Let me build you a daily architecture that is realistic, powerful, and sustainable. When you wake up in the morning, before you check your phone, before you speak to anyone, take 2 minutes to start your inner monologue in English. Just 2 minutes. Describe the room. Notice how you feel. Think about what the day ahead holds. Start your brain in English. This is the equivalent of tuning an instrument before you play. It sets the register for the day. Then, during your morning routine, showering, getting dressed, on making breakfast, continue the inner monologue. Narrate what you are doing. Make it specific. Make it sensory. Not just I'm making coffee, but the kettle is almost boiling. I can hear it starting to rumble. I need to find a clean mug. The coffee is in the cupboard on the left. Specific, sensory, present tense English. 5 to 10 minutes of this every morning is more valuable than most formal study sessions. During your commute or any period of travel, listen to English audio. Not to study it, to experience it. Choose something you genuinely enjoy. Let it fill your ears. If you find yourself translating, notice it and let it go. Practice just receiving the English, letting it land, following the meaning without analysis. At some point during your day, during a lunch break, during a slow moment at work, during any pocket of time, read something in English. It does not have to be long. A news article, a few pages of a novel, a blog post on a topic you love. Read without stopping to translate. Push through the words you do not know. Stay in the flow. In the evening, do your most active English practice. This is when you have the most mental space for deliberate work. 15 to 20 minutes of focused activity. Shadowing audio, writing in your English journal, having a conversation with a language partner, working with new vocabulary using the experiential method we discussed, building your chunk library. This is the focused practice session where you are deliberately building specific skills. Then, in whatever evening time you have for entertainment, make it English entertainment. A show you love, a film, a podcast, a book. Let this be genuinely pleasurable. The learning is happening whether you analyze it or not. Your brain is absorbing patterns, rhythms, vocabulary, chunks, all effortlessly as a byproduct of the thing you were going to do anyway, which is relax and enjoy something. Before you sleep, just before you close your eyes, spend a few minutes in English. Reflect on your day in English. Think about something that happened, something you felt, something you are looking forward to. Let your last waking thoughts be in English. There is fascinating research suggesting that the thoughts we have just before sleep have a heightened influence on memory consolidation. Spending those thoughts in English may actually help your brain process and solidify the English it has absorbed throughout the day. That is the daily architecture. And before you say, I do not have time for all of that, I want to point out something important. Almost everything in that routine is not added time. It is replaced time. You were already going to commute. You were already going to make breakfast. You were already going to relax in the evening. You were already going to lie in bed before sleeping. The practice fits inside your existing life. It does not require extra hours. It requires different choices about what fills the hours you already have. Now let us talk about consistency, because this is where most people fall down. The first week of a new language routine feels exciting. The second week starts to feel normal. By the third or fourth week, life intrudes. You miss a day, then another, and suddenly the momentum is gone and you feel like you are back to square one. Here is the truth about consistency. You are never back to square one. Every day of English thinking you have done is permanently part of you. Neural pathways do not disappear overnight. The work you did last week is still in your brain. Missing a day does not erase it. Missing a week does not erase it. The only thing that can stop your progress is giving up entirely. As long as you come back, even after a break, even after a month, even after a year, the foundation is still there, and you build on top of it. So give yourself the freedom to be imperfect. Commit to the practice not as an obligation, but as a gift you give yourself. You are not doing this because you have to. You are doing this because there is an extraordinary version of yourself waiting on the other side of this work. A version of you who can walk into any English conversation in the world and be fully, completely, powerfully present. Who can express the full depth of your intelligence, your humor, your personality, your ideas? Who has access to the largest body of knowledge and culture and human connection on the planet? Because English is the bridge to all of it. that version of you is not far away. That version of you is exactly who you are becoming, right now, with every English thought you think, every English word you feel, every English moment you choose to lean into instead of away from. Progress in language learning is not always visible day to day. Some days you will feel like you are flying, and some days you will feel stuck. The graph of improvement is not a smooth upward line. It is a series of plateaus punctuated by sudden leaps. Then those leaps come after the plateaus. They are built during the plateaus, in the invisible accumulation of practice that suddenly tips over into a new level of ability. So trust the process even when you cannot see the progress. Keep going even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because something is always happening underneath the surface in the deep neural circuitry of your developing mind. We have come to the end of this masterclass, but in another sense, you are at a beginning. The beginning of the rest of your English journey, the part where everything changes, because you now understand not just what to do, but why it works and how to make it happen. Let me leave you with this. Language is one of the most human things that exists. It is how we connect with each other across every possible divide. It is how ideas travel and transform and multiply. It is how we tell each other who we are and what we care about and what we have experienced. Every language is a different door into the vast house of human experience. And English is a door that opens onto an enormous wing of that house, filled with more than 1 billion people, an incalculable wealth of literature and science and art and film and music and conversation and connection. When you think in English, you do not just speak the language. You live inside it. You join the conversation that has been happening in English for centuries and will continue for centuries more. You add your voice, your unique, irreplaceable, absolutely necessary voice, to that conversation. The translation habit kept you on the threshold. What you have learned today opens the door. Walk through it.